Hey everybody, I'm Zac.
And I'm Jesse.
And you're watching In Depth
On Now You Know. Sponsored by abetterrouteplanner.com. You may know that Zac used a Better Route Planner to get him all throughout Europe on his European road trip, and you might be saying, okay, it works in Europe, does it work in the United States? And I've actually been using it for some, shorter, less crazy trips, but ones where I want to go up a mountain and then come back down a mountain, and what does that do to my charge? Because I know that it's going to do something weird, but am I going to be able to make it? I made it.
Nice.
I used a Better Route Planner.
and sponsored by ecoware.us. We have new designs uploaded every week, and we are carbon neutral. So that means every time you make a purchase, not only do we carbon offset your purchase, but also a tree is planted for every order. And you help support us here on Now You Know. And we got some new designs this week.
Yes.
A lot of people are going to want this one, I think.
So what are we going to be talking about this week?
Well, we got this story from one of our Patreons. Thank you, Arlene. This is a story out of Los Angeles. So the giant shipping company Maersk, they are the largest shipping company in the world. They are going to be replacing about 2,000 dock workers in the port of Los Angeles with autonomous electric driverless cargo carriers.
So what are the dock workers going to be doing now?
They're going to be out of work if this goes through. So the dock workers union is fighting this because they know they're going to lose their jobs. And the only ground they really have to stand on, because it is within the contract for Maersk to do this, the only ground they have to stand on is the electric charging. So they've gotten the local politicians to kind of hold up the permits, which would allow them to change out the electrical structure at the terminal.
Oh, electric charging of what?
Well, they need to charge up these driverless cargo carriers at night.
Oh, so they're electric?
Yeah, they're electric. They're autonomous and they're electric. So right now at a dock, the typical way you move containers around the dock is that you have these kind of smaller diesel trucks, right, that you drive the containers around with to get them where they're going. And those would be going away.
And being replaced by electric.
Right. So there's going to be 27 of these driverless cargo carriers arriving in late July. And these, if you can picture them, are these 45-foot high machines that lift up a cargo box off of the stack of cargo boxes that are sitting at the port, and they drive over to a truck that's waiting, and they lower the container onto the back of the truck.
So these aren't the big cranes that hang over the ships and pull the cargo off the ships. And it's not the trucks that drive those things away. These are like big, I don't even know what you'd call them, like a big claw grabber on wheels.
Yeah, I think they're called cargo carriers.
Interesting.
They just move the containers around the port. And so there'll be 27 of those coming in late July. There'll be another 100 next year. And so when all of them are in place, that's when all the jobs will be gone. So one of the reasons why Maersk wants to do this is that right now there's like 2 shifts of workers. They can work 16 hours a day. And when you go to driverless cargo carriers, you can go 24 hours a day. So they'll be able to operate the port 24 hours a day, so 8 hours longer a day. And this is a 484-acre terminal, so it's a giant terminal. You can picture just spread out with containers all over the place. And you can imagine all day long, you're driving around trying to find what you need to bring it onto trucks. So 4,000 trucks come in here a day to get cargo. And the turnaround time is going to be reduced from 105 minutes of average waiting time for a container to just 35 minutes once they go autonomous, because it's all going to be Wi-Fi. I don't exactly understand how it's going to work, but it'll be much more automated. And Maersk argues that they will save 2.2 million gallons of diesel fuel a year, not just from the mover trucks, but also the fact that the idling trucks won't have to sit there idling as long. And you might be asking, well, why do they have to idle? Why can't they just shut off their trucks? Well, they're in a line, and they have to constantly just inch up. And if it's hot, which it is in LA, then you got to keep your air conditioning running. So you generally don't shut off your truck. You just keep it idling. So you can imagine 4,000 trucks a day. You'll be reducing their idling time, each of them by about an hour. When I first read this article, coming from where we're coming from, it sounds like a good thing, right? We're replacing diesel with electric. We're going, to autonomous, which is more efficient. I'm assuming there's less chance of people getting hurt because there's less people there. So and you're getting your cargo out faster. That means that, the cost of it is going down and so forth. It all sounded good until I got to the part where there's going to be jobs lost. And so there's a huge petition signed by like 11,000 people, all the people being affected, the families of the people losing their jobs, basically fighting, the union is fighting this, saying we're going to lose our jobs. And that's a big argument.
And there's no clear answer, right? There's no like, how a lot of times it's like, oh, you shouldn't do that. Or it's like, oh, maybe you should do something else. This isn't sort of like an Aesop's fable thing where it's like, you shouldn't be greedy, or like, you should respect your elders. Like, there's no like moral that we've learned as humans that sort of prepares us for this, right? A robot is able to do your job better, faster, cheaper, and more efficiently. And so there's no real point in you doing that job anymore.
And that's what makes it really difficult. Is that jobs is this one word that when you say it, especially as a politician, right? You just say, I'm in favor of jobs. Everyone's like, yeah, that's great. It's like saying I'm in favor of education or I'm in favor of children. It's like, whatever. It's just this one word that sums up like a whole political parties are based on it, right? And it's like, you can't argue against it. Everyone wants to have a job. Everyone should have a job. That's great. Jobs. But I think what I want to kind of start getting the conversation to turn to is, do we all want jobs? And hold off for a second. A job typically means that you are told where to go in the morning, how you're supposed to dress, how you're supposed to act with customers, exactly what you're supposed to do. You're told when you can break for lunch and how long your lunch can be. And, down to pretty much every little detail of how you're supposed to act at this job to get your paycheck at the end of the week.
Right. That's how it's been for quite a while. Zach, what are you saying?
Well, I guess I'm just saying, why don't we think about an alternate reality where maybe that's not exactly what all of us have to do all the time? Because, if we go back in history and we look at people's jobs, a lot of times you go, that was a horrible job. I'm so glad that they don't have to do that anymore. Right? But even to this day, even right now, we've been having this discussion on the show a lot about, let's say, coal mining jobs, where we're talking about like, well, if we eliminated coal, there would be no more coal jobs, but there would be probably a lot of better jobs where you might be putting solar panels on roofs or installing wind turbines or something still to do with energy, but not climbing down into a mine and ruining your lungs and staying down in the dark in the soot for all day.
Right. And if we're talking about a dock working job, not to say that I don't want these people to have jobs, but the jobs that they were doing, you're driving a big truck around all day, you're breathing in diesel fumes all day. It's not the most creative thing in the world.
Exactly. I can't imagine you going home that night and being like, honey, guess how I stacked the containers today? Right. Like I did orange, green, yellow. Like, no, that you're told what to do, you have to do it. And I'm just saying, maybe we should start talking about the fact that one of the beauties of being a human is that we have creativity and imagination, is that we begin to think about a world where the jobs that we don't want to do are done by robots of some kind or another, and the jobs that we do want to do, we get to do.
Right. Which gets us into a very just dangerous conversation, because immediately people are going, what are you talking about? People are losing their jobs, and they're losing their jobs. And I want to say that I don't want people to lose their jobs.
No. But what a lot of people don't realize is that with technology, there are lost jobs, but there's always more jobs created when a new technology comes along. It's just that it's hard to see because at that moment, you're just talking about the people who lost their jobs. We don't follow those people and find out what happened to them a year later, 10 years later. So we're on YouTube right now, and there's a lot of people out there who make their living being YouTubers. YouTube was not a job just a few years ago. And in fact, if you went up to most people more than, a decade ago, and you said there's going to be this job someday called YouTuber, and people will walk around with a camera in front of their face, and people will just throw money at them, and they'll have millions of subscribers, and they'll be super popular, and they'll be blah, blah. You would have said, wait, slow down.
Right.
What?
No. The only people who are celebrities, they were in a movie, right, or they, some network picked them up for a TV show, or they were, did something amazing and the local news picked up on them, and then they made some kind of roadside attraction somewhere.
Do you know how the job YouTuber came about? It comes about because so much of our society's needs are taken care of now that there is more time and more energy for you to even watch YouTube. It's not just that the person being the YouTuber has the time, it's that everyone else out in the world has enough time to watch all this stuff on YouTube.
Right. Keep in mind that back in the 1800s, just about everybody was a farmer.
Right.
Just about everybody there was a farmer. Now, I'm not saying everybody, but the vast majority of people were farmers or worked on a farm or had to do in some way with agriculture.
Right.
Today,
ask most of your friends.
True. Right.
Exactly. Like, look at your friend group. How many of them are farmers or have much to do with being a farmer? Unless, I mean, there are certain communities, but for the most part, by and large, we don't even interact with where we get our food anymore.
Because we've gotten so good at it. We have combines that can collect so much grain in a day that it would just, if you had brought that back in time, it would have made people's heads explode. They would have just been like, are you kidding me? I'm out here breaking my back all day cutting down this wheat and then threshing it and then grinding it. Like, so much work went into just like making bread, and you would eat bread, and that's what you'd eat. We no longer really have that problem.
All that time and energy we don't have to spend foraging for food and finding food and so forth is now freed us up to do other things like watching YouTube. So to get to my point, there's lots of new jobs created whenever you come up with a new technology. It's just they don't sometimes make a whole lot of sense, and you can't predict them ahead of time.
So let's talk specifically about automating docks. You might be saying, I do not see how you can create any jobs automating docks. Maybe there's some guy who needs to tap on a computer all day to make all the robots run. But aside from that, I don't see any new jobs. And maybe there's a factory building things, but they were building the diesel manual ones anyway. So I don't see a net gain of jobs. We would have to be paying these people to be taking all of the things off the ships, which means that meant that everything that went on the ship would be just that much more expensive. You've now lowered the cost of shipping just a little bit, which means that more products get brought into market, which means that there are now more companies able to bring more cheaper, smaller things onto the market. Now,
not only that, you've sped it up. I mean,
right.
We just talked about how you've reduced the time waiting from 105 minutes to 35 minutes. So that means more stuff can come through that port.
And I also hear what you're saying, because most of you watching care about the environment. You're saying, you just said more, smaller, cheaper, crappier things. I did say that. But we're talking about jobs here. I'm not saying that this is like a huge win for the environment. I mean,
well, I do want to say at this moment, it may not be a win for the environment in terms of if you bring in more ships that are fueled by bunker fuel. But in the not too distant future, we hope when ships are powered electrically, then you could get to a day when the port is got electric ships in front of it with electric trucks and electric cargo movers on it. And so there might not be any more pollution coming out of that port, which means that, you used to not want to live near a port because they're noisy and dirty. But there could be a day in the not too distant future where living near a port might be kind of fun.
And that's what we're saying. Like, the future is going to keep marching on, and there's going to continue to be advancements and changes. And I think that we have been brought up in a culture that doesn't really expect change. Right. We've been brought up in a place where it's like, it's the 1950s, and everything is cars and the supermarket, and everything's going to remain the same forever because it's the best. And it was like that, and we tried to keep doing that through the 60s and the 70s and the 80s. We tried to continue to just, everything's the same. There's slight improvements, but we have had huge disruptions in so many different industries that it's no longer small incremental changes of like, oh, and this is slightly stronger and this is slightly better. It's like, no, we don't need to do things that way anymore. We don't have to have dock workers driving around 45-foot tall, cargo movers. Now robots can do that. We don't need to have taxis anymore. We can just have Uber. And so anyone can be a taxi driver. It's like, wow. That was a big change. We've made these changes, and as a culture, we're not coping with them at all. We're just sort of going like, whoa, that happened. Whoa, that happened.
Right. We're not preparing for the change.
We're not preparing. We're not saying like, oh, this happened. Therefore, other things could happen. Let's sit down and think about it and come up with some ideas and then implement those ideas. So that way, when the next innovation comes, when the next disruption happens, we'll be a little bit more prepared to deal with it.
Right, because this change that's happening at the Port of LA, we just kind of randomly are telling you this story. It's a random thing that's happening, and we probably wouldn't have heard about it except for a Patreon, sharing that story with us. And it's going to be happening in your town or city in some way or another. There's going to be something automated there, some buses or a street cleaner, and then it's going to be this and that. And before you know it, it's going to be this whole tidal wave of change. And we're not going to be ready for it because it's going to hit really fast because we are on an S curve. And like you pointed out, over decades and decades, it didn't seem like much of a change. That curve wasn't really, it seemed just linear or something. But that's what S curves look like. They fool you in the beginning because they're just so slow. And then all of a sudden, whoop, and I think that's kind of what we're in the middle of right here. A whole bunch of disruptions happening at the same time that are all going to hit together and are going to be so fast, your head's going to spin. And you're going to go, Zac and Jesse, why don't you tell us about this? Well, we're telling you about this.
Right. And it's going to mean that a lot of people are going to lose their jobs.
Right.
I wish that weren't the case. I wish that for every job that gets replaced by a robot, there was some daycare that you'd go to, and it would be like, you get to have fun, and you're still getting paid the same amount.
I kind of want to disagree with you. I'm not glad that people lose their jobs, but I'm glad in the sense that there's an opportunity that I don't think we're seeing. When you lose your job, it seems horrible, it's awful. But if you look at it as an opportunity to say, well, is that exactly the job I wanted? Was that my dream job? Or is there something that I could train myself to do that I wanted to do better?
Whoa, you are getting dangerously close to learn to code. And for those of you who didn't, nod your head knowingly when I said the words learn to code, let me bring you up to speed. Basically, coal workers were told learn to code. There was going to be a government program that would teach coal workers how to program, and then they were going to be expected to find programming jobs, and that was going to be the end of that. And a lot of them didn't like that idea. A lot of them had been coal miners their whole lives, and it seemed like not a good time to retrain for them. And they got mad. And so whenever journalists began to lose their jobs, they would tweet, learn to code. Like, oh, it sucks that you lost your job as a journalist. Why don't you learn to code?
And this goes to a lazy way of thinking and a way that we've kind of, as Americans, I think I can speak for Americans, I think many of us have been lazy thinkers, and we just follow leaders who give us little sound bites that sound pretty good at the moment. Like, vote for me, I'll get you jobs. That's kind of lazy thinking here because, sure, you can get someone a job that'll disappear in 5 or 10 years. And if I'm right, and if the speed of change is speeding up, then a lot of us will be losing our jobs. Maybe there will be automated YouTubers that will do our job. So what I'm asking us all to do is to stop every week and think about this a little bit more than we are.
But we're not going to tell you that we think that any of these are the solution to the problem. But what we do think that the solution to the problem is, I know I'm just contradicting myself, is that we all need to be thinking about it. We can't simply just rely on political dogma to guide us in any direction, okay? You need to take responsibility for yourself and to be thinking about exactly what makes the most sense. And so I have this idea that I want to put out to you, which is every week, find some people that are in your life and schedule some time to talk to them about non-manufactured topics. You might be saying, what are non-manufactured topics? So not sports.
The weather.
The weather is kind of inconsequential, in my opinion.
Game of Thrones.
Right. Anything related to TV shows or
the
movies.
Avengers.
No, none of that. Things that are actually really happening, things that are going on in your world, whether they be big, huge topics like automation and what to do about job loss, or small topics about like the local park and who's going to fix the swing set.
But Jesse, that sounds like politics, and we're not supposed to talk about that.
It doesn't have to be anything to do with politics.
It seems very uncomfortable to talk about these things.
No, it's not.
Don't you think?
No.
No?
No. And for those of you who are like, okay, so I'm going to start texting my friend. No. Stop. This is a face-to-face conversation with somebody. Not even Skype. Like, don't even do Skype. I think that humans really good at empathizing with other humans in front of you. And email, texting, even Skype does not work for what we're talking about, which is having deep intellectual discussions that are going to last like 2 hours long, maybe. So, bring some snacks and a drink, because it's going to take a while for you to dive into topics, go on tangents, think of different ideas, and really engage with that other person. It's key that there's another person there, because we get a lot of emails and we get a lot of comments and we get a lot of Facebook messages. And most of you are super wonderful, awesome, nice people. But sometimes we get an email, usually an email, that is really, 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 really long. And we begin reading it. And pretty quickly in there, if we were with the other person, we would have gone, wait a minute, you're telling me this? But what about that? And the conversation would have turned.
Can I bring up an example?
Yes.
Jesse and I one time met a gentleman in Florida at a supercharger who we began talking about Teslas and how great they were. And then the topic got to climate change. And he informed us that climate change does not affect Florida.
Right.
Or specifically South Miami.
Right.
And so we were like, oh, wait, slow down. Is there something we haven't heard about? Like, do you have a wall or something? Or like, how does it not affect you? And he said, oh, no, it just doesn't. It's not like that here. The water doesn't rise here as it does. I agree that the water is rising, but not
in
here.
other parts of the world.
But not here. So then I was like, oh, gee, I thought all the oceans were connected. And he's like, well, here, I know it doesn't happen. And I was like, how do you know that? And he's like, well, because I go out, my job is involved in going into the ocean to teach people to do stuff. And I've gone into the ocean every year for the past 12 years up to my thighs, and I've seen that the water has not gone up. And I was like, okay, well, we don't need to have any more of this conversation, because I can tell that you're not using science. So great, have a nice day. Whereas in an email,
an email would have just gone on and on and on, based off of this one point that would have just continued going straight into absolutely nothing.
And so if we had wanted to continue this conversation with that person, we could have at least said, well, I think science would show that that's not scientifically how you judge whether the water's rising in your neighborhood
because
or not.
If you keep going out to knee level or thigh level all the time, you're going to keep going out to thigh level, and then you're going to stop when the water's right here, and you're going to go, okay, we're going to learn how to do this now because the water's deep enough.
Well, and also, even if you had a scientific bench to stand on and so forth, 12 years isn't long enough to, with tides move. It just doesn't work that way.
Tides especially. Yeah, I think that this is important. And you might be saying, Jack and Jesse, this is going to take a lot of time. I don't have a lot of time. How is this going to
That's what politicians are hoping for. You don't have a lot of time, so if I tell you, hey, vote for me, jobs, you're like, great, that took 2 seconds.
Jobs, me, yes, good, you, yes. Okay, we're in.
You don't want to read the 4,000-page policy, thing that some candidate comes out with. Right. You want them to tell you on the first page, well, what's the title of your thing? Jobs, great, I'm with you.
And I don't think in many places that there is enough thought being put into anything that's going on, that is new, that is going to be disruptive in the world. The only people thinking about it are the people that are going to disrupt, and the people who are going to disrupt are just like, I'm going to make so much money. Exactly. Who cares what the consequences are? I'm going to think about my beach house, think about this, think about that. They are not thinking about all of the people whose jobs just got absolutely destroyed. They do not think about any of the other problems, because they're not all just Scrooge McDuck. They're actually engineers working on problems and stuff like that. And they're working towards, by and large, sometimes for the most part, a better planet, better world.
And this has been going on for centuries. Humans always evolve. We always come up with new technologies. Jobs are always lost. This is not some new thing that just happened in 2019. It's just that usually when a new technology comes along, everyone's so excited. When you invent, fire, then everyone's like, oh my God, this is great for all of us.
Great. It's not dark anymore at nighttime, the dark time.
Right. So, now, when new technologies come along, we're so focused just on ourselves that we can't see the benefit to society. So if we look at this port, there are many advantages to society that are happening by automating this process, right? It's cleaner, it's more efficient, therefore it's cheaper. So on the outside, that would look like just a wonderful improvement, a win-win. It's just that there are some people who lost their jobs, and that is too bad. But those people eventually, hopefully, will find other work, and maybe in new fields that weren't even a field before. And that's why I just want to say, throughout history, if you had tried to explain the job of a secretary, which was one of the most popular jobs in the United States for a few decades, if you had tried to explain that job to someone from a few hundred years earlier and said, okay, well, this will be a person who will answer the phone and type up memos. Wait, type up memos?
Right.
Yeah, type up memos on a typewriter. And they would have been like, how do they benefit society? How do they eat? How do they earn money? What?
And if you tried to explain it to a young person today, they would say almost the exact same thing.
Right.
How did they, why?
And the same thing is true of almost any new job that comes up. And so many of jobs today, if you tried to describe them to someone just a few decades ago, they would be like, I can't believe that so many people do that job. But it's going to keep happening, and it's going to keep happening so much faster. The reason why it hasn't really been an issue up until very recently is because you pretty much could get through your whole life doing the same job. Even if you had to change firms or maybe move a little bit, you could pretty much do that same job and nothing would change. But soon, very soon, jobs we can't even imagine changing. Some of the most popular jobs that we have, like truck driver, teacher, firefighter, police officer, are probably going to be automated.
And now you might be saying, well, but my job is not going to get automated in my lifetime. I do this, that, or the other thing. Technology is going to keep changing. For the longest time, there was email. And before that, there were memos, which I don't even know what a memo is. Now there's Slack. Now there's a billion different, softwares that help track problems when you're engineering things or through business
Slack
stuff.
is a perfect example. Here's a company that didn't exist a couple of years ago. Now it's worth $19 billion.
And a lot of people are like, oh, it already sucks. Like, they're already like, I need a better thing.
Right. And there will be a better thing.
And let me tell you, there are people that I work with that don't know how to use it. And those people are not as effective because they don't know how to use it. Now, there could be the argument of like, well, if we would just stick to one damn thing, then maybe we could all get some work done. But honestly, I know that in my lifetime, probably, if I were to continue working at the same company, stuff would keep changing and keep happening to the point where I would be pretty obsolete if I weren't keeping up with it.
Right.
So the people who keep sending emails addressed to all are going to one day realize, I don't have a job anymore.
Right. I mean, I brought up the example that my grandparents didn't have to jump on board to the PC when it came and became a thing. They could just be like, I don't know what this PC is. I'm never going to use one. I'm not going to buy one.
And I'm going to die
without using
without
one.
ever touching one.
And they were fine. That was fine for them. It just happened to be that was fine for them. But now you can't do that.
My grandparents have to know how to use a PC.
Right.
And they had to learn way later than when I had to learn, because I learned how to use a PC when I was 3.
Right.
Like, using a mouse is second nature to me. I can use a mouse way easier than I can, like, surf or something like that. Like, it's crazy. And there's going to be new and different technologies that are happening, being developed right now as we speak, that I am going to be like, why is that? I'm already starting to get like this. Why does this have to be this way? I'm 25. I shouldn't be doing that. That's the acceleration that we're talking about.
Right.
And we need to talk about it. Exactly. We need to have these discussions. So please, I know that you might not be, a master of philosophy or something like that, but it doesn't matter. You're a person with ideas. Sit down with another person with ideas and just talk. Talk about these different topics. Talk about different solutions to the problems. Try to identify new problems.
Imagine life 10 years, 20, 30 years from now. Imagine a weird world where like no one has to do anything practically.
Right.
Is that good? Is it bad? Would you like that? How would you like to get paid? How would you like, the economy to work?
And here's what I imagine is going to happen. If, say, everyone who watches this video, so maybe I'm going to be conservative and say maybe 40,000 people watch it. If everyone did that with another person, then we would have 80,000 people having a conversation about automation or about other, hopefully productive things. I think that the best ideas are going to rise to the top. And what that means is we are actually we're almost farming ideas that will hopefully make it percolate to the top. And, there are different solutions for automation. Andrew Yang thinks that universal basic income is going to be the solution. So that means that when you lose your job, you're not necessarily going to be destitute. You're going to somehow just get a check in the mail every month for $1,000, and that isn't going to be enough for you to live off of, but it is going to be enough for you to hopefully, his idea is that you're going to become an entrepreneur, because the only thing stopping people from being an entrepreneur, he says, is it's just scary. It's hard to make that step and to realize that you could fall flat on your face.
Right.
Other people suggest retraining programs, and I'm not saying that any of these solutions are the solution. I'm saying that you might come up with the solution, right. Or you might say, oh, gee, yeah, UBI would totally work. Or you might be saying, oh, retraining would absolutely work if we just gave them vouchers that would allow them to go to whatever college they wanted to, or, different things like that.
Or maybe an educational system that lets you know that that's probably going to happen in your life, that you're going to have to continually change.
I wish that we had the answers. I wish that Zac and Jesse could sit here and just tell you what was going to be the solution to everything, and that we're going to, everything's going to be okay. But we can't tell you that.
No. And I mean, anyone who can tell you that doesn't know either, right? I've never met or heard of anyone who could look that far in the future and know how it's going to work.
Aside from maybe Elon Musk. But even then, he is narrowly focused on a very particular thing.
Right. I'm talking like society and economy in general.
We don't really know. And so none of us are going to get the full picture. But if we can be breaking down the wall of the future with little gaps, and we can see through in these little places, and we can say, oh, if we did this, and this.
Isn't that the fun of being a human? Is
Right.
being able to talk about this stuff and discuss it and have an imagination for it. I mean, that's what I would look forward to, is having these discussions, with people during the day. So that's why I would do it.
And again, I think that the important thing is that it's a physical person who will bounce ideas off of you.
Yeah.
It is not writing a huge email to anyone.
Right.
Doesn't matter if it's your mother. I don't think that one huge block of crap and then you send it to them, very hard to respond to that in a meaningful way. It needs to be a conversation. We developed communication as conversational beings. We talk because we used to just be, the only people you could talk to were people that you were next to. Now we live in this weird, crazy world where you can send an email to a person on the other side of the world. But I think that we should go back to talking.
Yeah.
Talk to the other person. Let them talk back to you. Have a conversation. Get in depth about it.
Yeah.
Change your mind. Allow yourself to realize that you do not know what you're talking about.
Yep.
And see what comes of it.
Yeah.
I think that the worst case is that you while away an afternoon with someone that you hopefully like.
We're not expecting you to come up with the answers.
Right. Drink coffee, drink beer, do whatever.
Water.
Don't do all of them, but do drink water. Whatever you do, drink water. And just, break out some snacks and just chat, just talk. I think that it'll only have positive benefits.
Yeah.
Anyway, thank you so much for watching.
Now you know.